Anytime an Emily Dickinson poem can remind me of a Chris Cornell song, it's going to be a good day in the Adrian household. Now, this poem reminds me of Steel Rain by Chris Cornell, a song from his very first solo album. And if you are not a Chris Cornell fan, I don't know what you're doing here. You should be listening to Chris Cornell and reading Emily Dickinson. Uh, Chris Cornell wrote poetry much like Eddie Vedder, but maybe perhaps more poetic than Eddie Vedder in that time range, right? In that same movement of music. And today's poem is one that seems to be very well liked among people who appreciate Emily Dickinson, but I don't know that there's a whole lot of, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I don't know if there's a whole lot of work that has been done on this poem. It seems to be mainly appreciation for appreciation's sake. This is one of those times where, for me, to appreciate something means to have done a little bit of work on it. So I think that there are some things that we can talk about here, and I think that there are some very interesting things going on in this poem. The poem is known as Like Brooms of Steel, and it reads as such. Like brooms of steel, the snow and wind had swept the winter street. The house that hooked the sun sent out faint deputies of heat, where rode the bird, the silent tide, his ample plodding steed. The apple in the cellar snug was all the one that played. Now, very heavy in images, this poem, very heavy in the ideas that winter is a force of its own. Winter is a force to be reckoned with. Winter is a force maybe unusual in the natural order. But we can start here. Like brooms of steel, the snow and wind had swept the winter street. The house was hooked. That is one thing, one statement that is about, as you would maybe break it down, civilization. It is about what people do together. You've got the streets, you've got the house, you have brooms. All of these ideas are very civilization centric, very what people do centered. The apple in the cellar hung was all the one that played. We return at the end of this poem to the idea of civilization. The cellar is a human endeavor. Cellars don't exist in nature. So when you look at this poem as I have it here, okay, let's do one more thing here. So this is really sort of nature centered. So we'll do that in green. Here we have a poem which is separated, which is striated here. Nature in the middle, the way that a road runs down the middle of civilization, the way that a street parts little bits of civilization. You have the road on one side, you have the bar, you have the tavern, you have a restaurant. On the other side, you have shops, you have where people do other things. In the middle, we have a thoroughfare, we have a clearing, we have a through road. The poem is set up in a way that mimics what it is the poem is talking about. Now, getting into what it means to sweep the streets. Like brooms of steel, the snow and wind had swept the winter street. To sweep something is to clear it, to remove bits of things that maybe shouldn't be there. In this poem, what is removed by the snow and the wind is the people. We don't have any people on that road. We don't mention any people on that road. That road is cleared. It is cleared by essentially renaturing. The nature fell into the road, taking the people and bits of civilization off of it. There are no horses on the street. There are no people riding in carriages on the street. There are no people walking on the street. The snow and wind had swept the winter street. It is taking the humans away. So in this poem, we have Emily Dickinson saying that the winter had taken the things off of the road, the thoroughfare, the through road that should not be there. The things that should not be there would be in this explanation of things, people. I do not think that Emily Dickinson is anti-people or anti-civilization, though she was quite withdrawn. I think that what this is saying is that in the winter, there is a great return to nature. Before the advent of all of the electricity that promotes civilization and in some way inhibits human nature, in the winter, so people in the winter used to sleep, they say on average about 10 hours a night, as opposed to the 8 that we are sort of programmed to get. Our circadian rhythm programs us into kind of 8-hour shifts. That's basically from whence the 8-hour workday springs. Spring, not ironically used here, but we'll go with it. For anyone like myself who works overnights, this is something that is... So, for example, right now, weeknights, I'm still sleeping about 4 hours a day, despite the fact that it's dead winter here. We're in December. That's because of electricity. That's because we have some civilizational invention, the invention or harnessing of electricity, has allowed this to take place, has allowed the Adrians of the world to sort of profligate. Emily Dickinson, in almost, I would say, all of her poems, understands and explains nature as something we are fighting against, even if that often it is the case in Emily Dickinson, the nature against which we are struggling is the idea of death. Winter being symbolic for death. Here, Emily Dickinson is, instead of saying winter is death, winter is that which ends, it's sort of a pause button. It is saying that those practices that we do that make civilization, that make humans do what humans do, pauses. Nature says, hey, guys, take a step back. What is that apple in the cellar? That apple in the cellar is technology, the idea of the cellar, being used to allow humans something basically no other part of the natural order has. We have stocks, we have reserves. Squirrels try, they bury nuts and then promptly forget where they were, but they do not build cellars. They do not have all of this storage capacity that we have to allow us to store the apples in the cellar. This poem, in my opinion, can be appreciated as simply the what you would refer to as sort of a poem of observation. Hey, I'm looking out and this is what I see. I'm looking out my window and this is what I see. There's no one on the streets. Or you can interpret this poem as practice, as this is something that is happening. Why does this happen? How does this happen? And you're looking at the ways that people have, at the end of this poem, sort of rallied against the natural order of things. We understand that winter's harsh. Winter kind of sucks. Hard to eat in the winter, especially before we had all these processed foods. We did it anyway. We found a way, we built the road, and even if we have to take these momentary pauses in labor, these momentary pauses in work, the work will resume. Those streets will be cleared of the snow and wind. Those streets will be cleared once nature carries on. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There is poetry to be had every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.